welcome back, guys and gals. I have a super special guest today, somebody that I've known for a very long time, maybe 2004. She'll tell me in a second if that's correct. We were in what you guys know as NXIVM. We called it ESP, but you guys know it as NXIVM. We called it Executive Success Programs. And she was a high-ranking member like me. She was on the executive board, and she is one of the people that was in what you guys called NXIVM the longest. So a huge thank you to my friend Karen Unterreiner for being here today. Yay!
Hey, Mark.
We text backwards and forwards, just so my audience knows. Karen and I text backwards and forwards. We don't talk as much as we did for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think where I want to start, we're just gonna launch right in. I kind of want to start because I want the audience to know, because most people have seen you a little bit on the vow. Maybe they saw you in a little bit culty, or heard you. But let's just go back to sort of the beginning before we get into like the other stuff, like just the origin story of like how you ended up connected to Keith and how all of that happened, if you don't mind.
Yes, that's it's funny because the vow for me is sort of the ending. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
that whole Nexium itself is sort of the ending. It started way back. I went to Rensselaer Polytech up here in upstate New York, and the week before I got to college, my father passed away of a heart attack. So I arrived on campus shaken, and I saw this what at the time was a kind of cute guy over on the press. And he ended up visiting my room, and I thought we became a couple at that point, and spent 4 years hanging out with what turned out to be Keith Raniere. So I've known him since I was barely 18. Um, yeah, it was my basically my entire adult life. I was mostly a kid when I met him. I was very naive, sheltered, didn't really have much exposure to the world. In fact, jumping onto campus would have been a culture shock anyways, but then running into this very unusual guy,
Mm.
which, yeah, I was smitten immediately. Somebody was paying attention
And
to
I
me.
imagine you were a pretty smart kid as well
We had to
to
be
be
to
an
go to
RPI.
RPI, yeah,
Yeah.
but he portrayed himself as even smarter. Um, yeah, and what
Not true, by the way, not accurate.
we don't know, but given where he ended up, I have to say it's not accurate because in the end, he was pretty dumb. Um, yeah, but yeah, it was a ride in college because he slowly would release out different things about that he could do. He made a point of emphasizing how slowly he was telling me about his intelligence, about his being so-called Eastern Coast Judo champion, all these different playing piano. So it felt like it was a big deal because of the way he presented over time, how he could do all these things. So,
So literally the grooming began way back then.
way, way, way back. Yes, and it was grooming. Senior year of college, there was another girl, well, actually junior year, there was another girl that had come into our circle. And it turns out over summer vacation before senior year, it was my best friend, and he had spent the summer with her. And she was supposed to be my roommate. I broke up with him the beginning of senior year, um, but got pulled back in. He used to say it was my ethical breach to break up with him. It was my ethical
Wait, he
breach
said
to go
that.
back.
Wait, he said that back then?
No, no, that was later. But he
Okay.
did say I did damage by pulling away from him back then. Um, I think the most damaging thing of my life was going back to him. Um,
So he was basically, but he was kind of stooping somebody else.
I was stripping half the campus. At some point, I kind of figured it out, but this is how your brain works. I compartmentalized it, and I didn't want to know. I didn't want that this incredible relationship I thought I had to not be true. So
Mm.
that's when I started gaslighting myself, and he started gaslighting me, is thinking I had a special relationship and he just needed to strip a lot more than I wanted to.
So, okay, so you guys broke up, but then you stayed connected and then
Well,
started
I
doing
got
all these
back to get.
businesses.
I thought I was getting back together with him, but he was still seeing the other women, probably many other women. And I went. I moved away to get a job for a little while, but eventually moved back to where he was and moved in with him. Meanwhile, he was also living with somebody else. So um, he had an ability to make a lot of women think they were the one in his life, and these other women were just things he had to deal with. Um,
Hmm.
I still see that. I still listen to some of the women that were involved during NXIVM, and when you listen to them talk about the time they were with him, they still think they were special for a little while.
Yeah.
None of us were ever that, but I really thought that my relationship with him was different. He convinced me of that.
You know, just to jump forward, I mean, I think one of the things that I really have seen is that because I've also connected, obviously, you know, I know some of those women,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them still talk, and it's almost like they're still kind of in love with him in some ways.
Yeah.
Not all of them. Whereas when we finally met, I guess it was 2019. Well, we saw each other. We're going to get there, but
Yeah.
I remember thinking like you have no delusions about who he was and what the relationship really was.
That took some work, but yeah. Yeah. All the pieces were there. I look at it like I put every little incident that happened, that told me he was lying, I put in a box. And I never emptied all those boxes out on the table together. So you could deal with one little incident here, one little incident there. Like I found another woman who lived with us, I found her birth control. And he gave me some really ridiculous excuse of why she has this birth control. Because there was no other men in her life, so it had to be that he was having sex with her. But he gave me an explanation and I put it in a box. And I didn't put that together with all the other little pieces. But at some point I dumped the whole thing on the table and went, no,
Hmm.
um, this can't all be okay.
I have a theory I wanted to run by you, and just so my audience
Okay.
understands, like Karen um, was a very good trainer and had a really deep understanding of just human behavior. So we had like really amazing conversations over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I've been thinking about, like talking about putting it in a box, is I'm realizing what we do is we put everything in our box, but it's like a shame box
Mm-hmm.
because it's the stuff we're ashamed of, and sometimes the perpetrator did stuff that we feel ashamed that we did with them or we participated with them. So we not only bury our own shame, we bury all the things associated with our shame. So we bury our awareness of shit that we should actually be looking at.
Yes. Yes.
Right? I'm really feeling that now.
Yes. And he assisted in that by convincing me and I think others over the years that we were completely incapable of surviving on our own. So even when I thought about this is not right, what he's saying to me about just hold on, things will get better. Um, things are not right, but he convinced me I was not capable, and others were encouraged to tell you that you're not capable of going out there on your own.
Yes. What he did with me much later was yes, you can go out on your own, but you're going to run into all the same problems that you're seeing in the organization. So might as well like deal with them in the organization.
It was worse. I wouldn't survive. I wouldn't be able to support myself. I wouldn't be able to handle the world, which was self-fulfilling because he convinced me of that, and then I was less capable in the world because I was so scared. I'm
Which
now
for my
living the
audience,
life I was afraid of, but
yes. Yes. Now living the life you were afraid of, yes. And just so my audience understands, I mean, Karen, you wouldn't say this, but Karen's fucking brilliant, very, very
no, no, no,
smart.
no.
Eh, you know. What was the thing you were trained to be an actuary?
Yes, I was originally, that's what I went to Connecticut to do was to, I became an actuary there and then I moved back up here. I'm sorry, there's
Yeah.
some noise. Let me,
Ah, is it? I wonder if it's hot out there right now. Is it hot
it,
on that side of the coast?
it is raining and muggy,
Mm.
but
Mm.
it's a problem with advantage and disadvantage of living next to a park.
I
So,
know. I love that park though. I love that. I love where you are. I think it's amazing where you are.
yeah, it's beautiful.
Um, okay, I want to
So,
back up a bit because my audience is basically like, wait, but who exactly is Karen? So
yeah,
how how would how
I
would you
was a nerd.
explain who you were in NXIVM and who you were to him for for all those years?
Yeah, I was someone he utilized to do anything that needed some smarts, anything technical. Or like in his earlier companies, I was the chief financial officer. So I was a mathematician. When I got to RPI, I was going to go into physics, and he talked me into going into math instead, which I
Mm,
loved. So that was one good guidance he did have. Um, but I've always been the person that calculates things for him or figures things out. Yeah, his grunt, I would call it. Um, yeah.
right.
So
Yeah, the grunt number cruncher.
yes. So in Nexium, I had a sort of a dual role. I was that, and also, like you said, I was a trainer and I worked with people. Um, so it was very different. One was alone in my computer, and the other is out with the people and connecting with people. Um,
Mm,
a lot of my motivation with the people was I didn't want anyone else to feel like I did, as bad as I did, as bad about themselves as I did. So I was um, sort of the gentle alternative to some of the other training that people were doing. I tried to get in there and help people feel okay, but there was always a conflict because I was being told to tell them they were a jerk. Well, I was trying
mm,
to tell them you're okay.
hmm
um, Yeah.
hmm
So I had kind of a dual thing going on there.
I do remember that. I remember because you were always trying to build people up. It's funny. I think because I had some of that similar struggle, like being told to do certain things. I'm like, not on board. I think at
Yeah.
the end, by the way, I think I told you this. At the end, I kind of went rogue. The last few months in
Yeah.
intensives, I'm doing my own process.
Yes, I remember that. I remember that
Yeah.
because you were working with me during one of the dances, and I'm like, whoa,
Yes.
this is not what they normally do.
I
Yeah.
know. I just couldn't anymore. I think because I was in 2017, I was like, I just can't anymore. It's breaking everybody down.
Well,
So,
the really sick thing with that was though, I was told I was weak because I wouldn't go and tell somebody they were a jerk. Um, that was I started to realize there's a problem with that. That strength has to do with beating people up mentally, and kindness and compassion was considered weak.
yes, man, that's so screwed up. So, let's just take the audience through a little bit. So, the beginning of ESP, what would become Nixium, like how did that happen?
It happened in my living room actually, but I was not included because I wasn't a sale. I mean, I was introverted. I was not a salesperson. I wasn't brought in right away. But the five people that started it in my living room. I remember them talking about what do we call it, when he got them to tell him that he should be called Vanguard. He gave them a few names, but you want this one, right? um,
Yeah.
yeah, I watched all that happen, and it was about a month later that I came in and started going to the classes.
I was thinking about that because we spoke about that before, the whole Vanguard thing. He would always like offer up an idea and a bunch of different potential names and then like gently push us towards the thing he wanted.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
And then we
So he
thought it
did
was
that with everything.
we thought we came up with it.
Yeah. Well, we thought at first we were too dumb to have come up with it. He would go either way. He would say, "I can't believe you guys don't think. You don't think enough." When we came up with an answer he didn't want.
Right.
And
So then, way back then in your living room, what was it supposed to be? What was this company going to be?
it was more about professionals because I mean, we were originally named Executive Success, and helping people be more productive, and the ethics thing was getting in there, but it wasn't as big. But it wasn't about helping people with their emotion, basically becoming psychology. That wasn't in there in the beginning. It was
Oh,
more
when did that
practical.
happen?
Um, I wasn't at the initial um, session that they did. First time they called it therapy by numbers at that point, an exploration of meaning, because it was done on Tony Natali, who, in order to keep his relationship with her in a box, I wouldn't go over her house. Um, but yeah, that's when he started that. But even then, when he called it therapy by numbers, it seemed like something simple. It was
Yeah.
not like some deep, to your core, figure you out kind of thing at that point. It was just a little exploration, not much different than the
Yeah.
questions we would ask in a class.
Yeah.
Um,
So I want to back up a little to something else I keep thinking about. As you know, I talk to a lot of people now who've come out of similar situations, and I get asked this question. Other people get asked the question. They always say, "Well, you were smart. Like, how did you not see it?"
yeah.
I hate that question. But like, now that you've spent time out, and we'll get back to you coming out. But now that
Yeah.
you've spent time out, like, how do you understand that process of being in an organization and not being an idiot, but just staying put? How do you understand it now?
For me, I don't know if this is the same for everyone, but it took, um, I got into therapy a week after Keith was arrested. I had to be secret about it because we weren't allowed to see outside people. But I specifically chose a male therapist because I was still indoctrinated to, I couldn't let somebody help me think I was a victim. I didn't want to think I was a victim. Turned out what I needed to realize is that I had been victimized. But I got very lucky and I got a therapist that um, was trained in, um, called David Schnark, I think is the person behind Brain Talk. Um, But what I had to recognize is that I was being victimized and I wasn't having a natural reaction to it. Um, Eventually, we went back to my childhood to figure it out, but I did not have a normal disgust reaction when somebody did something disgusting at me.
Hmm.
Most people, like if someone hit you, you'd be like, "Ooh, you." I didn't have that. And I had to build it and develop it. So someone could be what my therapist would call sadistic and cruel to me. First time he said that, I looked at him like, "What are you talking about?" That's like, maybe he's doing shock therapy. He's trying to, um, you know, over say something, and I was like, sadistic and cruel. These things that people are doing are sadistic and cruel. And I walked around with
Mm.
that phrase in my head for 6 months till I realized I could start to have the right reaction to these things that people were doing. That was
Mm.
what made me so susceptible to Keith because he could do things and I'm like, that's normal for people to do to me. So it did not seem like it did not set off any alarms in me. So I was kind of prepped for him
That's
in that
so
way.
interesting. Actually, you and
I
I haven't discussed this before. Uh, why? Why do you think that was the case?
I started very young with a mom that would basically constantly put me down. I wasn't what she wanted. And so I got used to that. So that's why also any little crumb he gave me felt like the world and I could build on that. But it's when I started to react to the things that he was doing, like when he went so far as branding women, um, then I could start to feel something. But it took a while to be able to have that full reaction to the things he was doing. Um, Now I get excited when I get disgusted.
Hey, quick interlude. If you're liking these conversations and want to help me keep expressing what is on my mind, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and maybe even follow the podcast wherever you listen. And if you want to go a step further in supporting the show and getting access to some behind-the-scenes rants, you can join me over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Mark Vicente. It really does make a difference. All right, back to the episode. I can imagine, because it actually, it's sort of like a sense of self and sense of boundaries and a sense of,
Yeah.
What were the, just so my audience understands, what were some of the things that, the ways he treated you that maybe at the time you didn't think were bad, but you later realized, well, that's not cool. That's bad.
He did things like, it was very interesting when I read some of the transcripts from his trial, and there was lists of text exchanges he had with one of the women, and the wording in there, it was identical to things he said to me. When people said, "Oh, that didn't really happen," I'm like, "Yeah, it did, because it happened to me too." That when he would do things like, if you challenged him on anything, he would start to act like you were hurting him. He would say, "You're hurting my heart," and he didn't mean emotionally; he meant physically, that you were killing him. So any kind of standing up for yourself, even in the slightest little way, was you were told you were doing harm. Now, if you want to be a good person, anybody who is a good person would react to that and back off, which means he was using the best of me to control me. But he would leave, when he left to go live with Tony and Natalie for years, he would say, "I just need to do this. I need you to back me here," and would use your, like, "Okay, I can stand behind you and help you." Um, yeah.
I remember when I don't remember the year, but when I finally we came with cameras to like, see each other again. And I went into your living room, which I'd never been in before.
Yeah.
And I remember you told me, correct me if I'm wrong, you said that you guys were living together, and then one day he just left, never came back.
Without
And
saying it, without saying that that was happening. Yeah.
Without saying. And then I think, what did he leave his robe there? Like it was still there, just his shit was still there?
They didn't, there was some big argument that he had with one of the two women that he was mostly with at that point. And one of the women left, and he followed, and they moved into what was his library, but they didn't move. They just left, and they would come back for things now and then. And then they bought him new clothes. This is what happens every time he leaves one woman, moves on to the other. They get new clothes. So they never moved out, which left me left me on post, is what he would call it. And he would talk about how leaving on someone on post is such a bad thing. But you always thought maybe he'd come back. And he would imply, things are really hard right now. Things will get better. There came a point where you wanted to punch him when he said things will get better.
Oh my God.
But I was left there waiting.
Yeah, I remember that. Because I remember we also, in that same shoot we did, you also pointed out his mother's ashes on the top of the bookcase, which was the most fucked up scene, right?
Yeah, I know.
In the series.
That bothered a lot of people when you
told me that. And by the way, just so the audience understands, like, I rarely went into any of these. So just understand, like in Clifton Park, there was these townhouses, and there was this little road called Flintlock Lane.
Yeah.
And Karen's townhouse was there, and there was another townhouse and another townhouse, and they were all populated with people that were very close to him. I didn't understand how it really worked.
Yes.
And then just across the way was his executive library. And I was always which another condo with the hot tub and the whole stupid deal. And I couldn't understand what was going on, because I'm explaining this to my audience, because it wasn't like I was in my mind going, well, he's stripping all of them, because I was like, well, he's a renunciate. He's not attached to anything in the external world. Why would he be stripping all of them? That doesn't make any sense. Later, like the last year of being there, I was thinking, I think he's like when Barbara Jeske died, right? I can say her name because she's gone. Okay. He said to me, it's like I just lost a wife. And I'm like, what?
He did.
What? The fuck are you talking about? You just lost a wife. And then I was thinking, oh, they had a relationship? That was weird. In fact, the prosecutors, when I was with the FBI, I spent like almost a year with them before the trial. I remember Moira Penza said to me, can I just ask you, Mark, you didn't know that he was sleeping with Mariana and Pam? I said, no. Well, what did you
Wow.
think? I said, I thought they were fucking gay lovers or some shit like that.
That too.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And Moira was just puzzled. I just,
Well, that's why you weren't allowed in my, I think that's why you weren't allowed in my condo. I think you would have seen the
okay.
way people were interacting and the way he played, literally played with the different women, and you would have figured it out.
Oh.
I have
Oh,
a
that's
feeling
interesting.
you would have started to put the pieces together that because
I was never allowed into any of those places.
yeah.
That's true. That's true.
He was good at keeping everything separate. Like there was a time where both there were two women who both thought they were the number one at that time
Mm,
or
mm,
the only.
mm,
And there was a big problem when they got together once because they started talking and everything
mm.
blew up. But so he kept everybody isolated. There was one woman that barely ever left her condo, but if she had, she would have found out what was going on with everybody else.
Just, I have my version of what I understand about this ethical breach bullshit. But
Yeah.
like,
Oh.
what was like the first time he introduced this ethical breach thing? What was going on there?
I don't, it had to be the some he was going after some person. He never introduced anything just because it was a good idea to introduce this concept. I don't know which person he was going for at that point because it helped him with so many of us because now you could say you're doing something wrong and we would believe him. I don't know who the person was that that one was set up for. There were other things I knew what this
Yeah.
was for this person. Like there was a whole training for you right before you left. The whole gymnast
Right.
training
What
was
was the
totally
training?
it was designed
Yes.
for you to
Yes.
get mad at Bonnie.
Yes.
The
Yes.
whole I even asked Nancy at one point, is it? And she said yes. This is
Yes.
designed to get you to think that Bonnie was victimizing herself.
I remember, I have to go back and look at my notes because I realized that the training was designed for me to basically reject Bonnie. And I
Hmm.
remember asking, I thought asked Keith or Nancy, this is for me. And one of them denied it, but the other one said yes.
Hmm.
And then I realized, oh, you motherfuckers are lying to me.
Yeah, always.
But I still didn't get to the point of like, oh, you guys are just fucking horrible people and like you're evil. I hadn't gotten there yet.
Yeah. Yeah, but the ethical breach to me is when I look back, to me that's the worst piece of tech that well, it's because it could be such a beautiful concept. I
Yeah.
mean, it's you value something and you're
Karen,
struggling to
would
uphold
you
it.
mind explaining it to the audience, like
Oh, sure.
what the concept was? Yeah.
Ethical breach was supposed to be that you have a certain value set. You have what's important to you and how you want to be in the world. And you recognize that you acted inconsistent with that. You weren't who you want to be. And you help yourself be whole with who you want to be by repairing that in some way. Going and trying to make it so that you uphold it in the future, repairing any damage you did because you did to what you want the world to be and what you want you to be. That's something that's core to you. But somehow in the organization, people started telling us what our ethical breaches were. And I'm like, part of me at the time went, and this is one of the things that fell in a box, is how can you tell me what my ethical breach is? That seems like a breach in itself. But it became, you're doing this thing we don't like. And so we're going to tell you that you're not upholding yourself. Um, when many times it was that you were finally upholding yourself.
Yes. Yes. Because what I finally understood was that the ethical breach really, in practice, was anything he didn't like,
Yes.
or he was offended, or he was having a tantrum. and he would call it an ethical breach. But what it did is it poisoned the idea of a very deep personal principle idea as well.
Hmm.
And that hurts, right? That hurt all of us.
Yes. 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 That always upset me that they took something that could be really beautiful. Because now in my life, I'm struggling. I've gotten past the first stuff, and now I'm trying to figure out who I want to be and what I want to do with my life. And so that is really important to me. Like, what person do I want to be now? And I look back and I see how they tarnished that concept. We tarnished that concept by telling people you have this breach because you're doing something I don't want you to be doing.
Just to give context, so how long were you under his, let's call it a spell, control?
About 40 years.
Fuck.
That's what I sometimes get upset that it took me longer to get where I am today than most people after you blew the thing up.
Yeah.
Um, but then I realize I've got a lot of programming to shift. And it's in there in the littlest of ways. The other day I was putting on mascara and I realized I was thinking about how my eyelashes are short. And that's
Hmm.
because when he was semi living with someone who has very beautiful woman who has very long eyelashes, and he came to me one day and he said, your eyelashes aren't short, they're just blonde at the end. And I'm like, you were talking to her, you know? And so now that still creeps in every single day when I put my
Yeah.
mascara on. So he's still there in so many little teeny ways because there's so much history.
And I really
Um,
want the audience to understand and to I just really absorb like what it's like to be under the control of somebody for like 40 years. Cause I was under the control for 12.
mhm.
I also didn't have a romantic relationship, with him. There was some fucked up brother, son, dad bullshit.
Yeah,
Um, but it's different. The only thing that's worse really is being born into something where you have no recollection of an original self.
that was one thing that was um, interesting for me because I fall somewhere between someone who got in a cult and someone who was born in a cult. Because I didn't make the choice to join NXIVM. It was created around me.
Yes.
Um, and
Yes.
um, so I'm in this place somewhere in between. I remember going to one of the cult organizations. I saw went to one of their seminars, and I couldn't fall in either category, which left me lost again because I am more like the people who were born in a cult than because
That's
the
that's a good point.
the way I was evaluating Keith was through tools Keith put in my head. So if I look
Yes.
at is his behavior bad, well, he taught me what good and bad is. Um,
Yes.
so there's a double level of deprogramming you need to do in your head because you don't have a foundation to compare him to. I
Yeah.
didn't have a self to compare me to. Um, I have to now build it, and who I am.
Yeah. And you and I spoke about this before, and I've spoken to other people since. Like, you have to figure out, what do I like? What do I not like? What do I think is good? What do I think is bad?
Hmm.
And then it's tainted by even the stuff you think you like and don't like. It's tainted by what he liked or didn't like.
Yes, like he and I used to listen to the rock band Yes. I don't know if I like them. I can't, I don't, I can't listen to them because I don't know was I enjoying it because he enjoyed it? It's hard to reestablish your likes and dislikes. Um, yeah, because he's in everything. I can't even watch Star
Yeah.
Trek, um,
Right. Right.
it's everywhere. The foods they eat, it's everywhere. Um,
Yeah. People don't realize the damage. So I want to back up a bit because you and I had conversations that never ended up in the vow. They were good
mm,
conversations, but one of the things I remember I'd like you to talk through is just basically Bonnie leaves,
mm,
I leave, and you told me that you and a few other people were trying to track what was going on.
I was tracking more on the financial side. What you got, I remember joking with Sarah Edmondson, the best thing they did was to report, to do chargebacks on their credit cards. That put us on, I knew that was coming and they did it. And I was like, that was the smartest thing you guys did because it stopped us from being able to make money. Um,
Yeah.
but I knew um, that the Claire was doing a number of things, like trying to get the police after you guys in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Um, I remember asking him about the time that he tried to get some people to go to Mexico so they could be arrested. And I asked him, did you do that? And he said, well, it's complicated. That's more of his gaslighting. Like
Mm,
you're too dumb to understand the complexities of
mm,
what I'm doing.
mm.
Um, but yeah, I was so much in, putting my fingers in the holes in the dam as you guys were knocking down the shit on the other side. Um, but there was a lot going on, legally. And we also, I remember what they didn't put, I can't remember if they did put it in the vow where I showed you the spreadsheet that we
Yes,
were,
talk about that. Talk about that.
there was a spreadsheet, Google sheet that was being kept that was all the people that were leaving and who we thought got them out. You remember you looking at it, and some of them were correct, some of them weren't. But we were tracking who was going out and trying to catch people before you guys got to them.
Hmm.
And get people to not talk to you because we knew so it from my perspective, I knew there was stuff I didn't know about that, but I was dying to know what you were saying to them for my own, that was all of a sudden they were like drop, somebody talked to them and they drop.
Yeah.
Um, if
Because
they
at that point you didn't know about DOS, you didn't know about the branding, you didn't know about any of that.
not much, it was just slowly
Yeah.
coming out and we're being lied to about a lot of it.
Yeah.
Nancy lied to me that she knew or she didn't know, and then yeah, it was
Yeah.
crazy. But the other one trick we could tell is if somebody downloaded the Signal app, if they showed up on Signal, we knew they were going soon because you guys were
Yes.
contacting them.
Yes, we were using
You
Signal.
know,
We were using
if
such hardcore encryption.
somebody showed up on Signal, we knew they were going to be going soon because we knew you guys got to them.
Oh, you see, I didn't think of that. I mean, I remember this is you and I discussed this on camera, but I
Yeah.
don't think it was ever used. I don't think. It's been a while since I
I
saw
think
it,
they
but
just showed us looking at a computer, but they didn't say what we
yeah,
were
I think
doing.
so. But I because I remember in that scene that would have been an amazing scene. I told you that at a certain point I was advised by somebody who had dealt with psychopaths, and they said, "Look, they're tracking every single thing you're doing. At some point, what you need to do is put information in there so that you can find the leaks, because there's people that are
Mm.
leaving that might be
Yeah.
double agents. So give them bad information, and then throw a lot of contradictory information into the system so it creates confusion." And I remember you saying, actually, that's what happened.
Hmm.
At some point, I think you told me it was very confusing what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. We were trying to find out what you guys were doing, what you were, what was happening. And
Yeah.
I'm sure they had private detectives and stuff because Claire was
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
we know that there were at least 3 or 4 sightings outside our apartment in LA that were private investigators. I have so many like thoughts and questions. The other thing I want the audience to understand, what's so unique about, I mean, it's many years now, but what's so unique about Karen and I connecting and staying friends is that Karen and I were good friends inside, very respectful, kind to each other. And then when the shit hit the fan and we were doing everything we could to dismantle everything, we became so-called mortal enemies,
Yes.
which was fucked up and weird. And I don't know if I've told many people about this. So I'm going to tell you my version and you tell me your version.
Okay. Okay.
You tell for the audience mostly, because I found out that the film director, who I won't name, was continuing with a Tourette's movie and was getting it into film festivals. And so
Mm.
I was like, this is
Oh,
very bad.
yes. Yes.
Right. So I went to Vermont with one of the producers and a cameraman to basically confront everybody in the theater at the film festival. And 2 days before, I'd written to the film festival explaining to them, you guys don't understand what you're doing. You're showing a film that's basically supporting a criminal enterprise. There's trafficking going on. There's all kinds of awful things going on. These people are going to go down. It's going to be a criminal thing. And they just basically blew me off. And so I was desperate. So I thought, well, fuck it. We're just going to drive to Vermont. So we drove to Vermont. I was so terrified. I remember sitting in the van because it's like the van. It's me and Bonnie and
Mm.
cameraman and one of the producers that we brought along. I was terrified because I felt like I have to just go there and do something. I didn't even know what I was going to do. I wasn't even sure.
Wow.
And I remember walking into the lobby and seeing everybody that I hadn't seen, and my heart was pounding because at this point I hadn't seen anybody for like it was getting close to maybe a year. And I was trying to push people verbally. It was not my
Mm.
best moment. It was not my best moment. And I remember, I think I walked up to you. You can tell me your version. I think I walked
Okay.
up to you, and I think I said something
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I
Oh.
thought we were friend. I thought we were friends."
Mm.
And you yelled at me and said something like, "I do not approve of what you're doing."
Mm.
I think,
That was the only thing I could come up with. Yeah.
yeah. And I was so fucking sad because like I had such fondness for you. And I had the vantage point at that point, just because I was a little ahead at that point. I had the vantage point of realizing that everybody who was against me had kind of an infection, an ideological infection,
Mm.
that and didn't know it. And I understand because I had that.
Yeah.
And I was so fucking sad, and I was like, God, I hope one day we can be friends. Anyway, that was my. What was your
Well,
experience?
to back up, the funny thing was, I felt Keith used to tell me, you should talk to Mark. You guys have similar belief systems, like existential and all that. You guys think a lot alike. But I couldn't share a lot of any of my life with you because I couldn't
Mm,
share that I had this relationship with him. It was extremely painful because you couldn't have a relationship with anybody else, but he ignores you. So I had all this struggle going on, and I can't share any of that with you. And that struggle would explain a lot of my weird behavior. So I always had a
yes.
distance.
I could
Um,
never figure you out.
well, because I would often agree with you in meetings and support you, but I'd back off at some point because I would be I know that what would be coming at me if I did, because you would do can I be the asshole here?
I
I
would.
still
I
use that in
would.
meetings. Um,
Do you?
but so there was this, like, I really admired you, but I had to keep a certain distance. But I got to know you a little bit because when you were creating the movie about the awful stuff that was going on in Mexico, I worked with you, and I saw your insights. I saw how noble you were. You talked about South Africa and things like that, and I saw that you were a very strong, noble man, and
Mm.
that's carried with me through everything. So we went up to Vermont to support the people that were doing, because I had seen the Tourette's, and that's one thing that's still confusing for me because I was there, I watched these people stop having Tourette's, but but there's everything else. So that was one thing that's always been a struggle for me. How did that happen that these people were helped? But
Mm.
yeah, but I went up there and we heard that Mark was in the area, so you had been spotted, and
Mm.
I was scared and confused because I have these two images of you. I have the man that I have incredible respect for, and then I have this person that I'm supposed to hate. And in your case, somehow uniquely, the the more accurate image I had of you was strong. And so when I saw you there, and you stabbed me in the heart when you said I thought we were friends, because I know that killed me because I did feel that way. Um, that was the only um, politically in NXIVM correct response I could come up with at the time. Um, that was so uncomfortable for me. I've talked with you before about the fact that a lot of what got me to start doing my own investigation, reading the Frank report and everything else, was when people said, you know, you were starting to be painted as evil, and it didn't match with what I knew of you. Your, for lack of a better word, nobility is what got me out, because that contradiction was so strong. I
Mm.
believed you as much as I would believe Keith. So there
Mm.
was there started to be a pushback.
Mm.
Um, so that's why I've always been so, you're the only person that's been able to make me cry since I got
Mm.
out, because that, what you did and who you are, it's more who you are is what got me out, because
Mm.
that contradiction was just too strong. Um,
That's very kind. I mean, it's funny. I was hoping, because you know that letter I wrote, letter to the inside, the grab a glass of wine letter?
hmm Yes.
I can't remember. You read that when you were still inside, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I don't remember anymore. Did that have any impact?
Not really. Um,
No. Yeah. Yeah.
I was, my biggest concern at the time was that you were going to get me in trouble because you talked about how we talked about Nancy behind her back.
Yes.
I was like,
Yes.
oh no, she knows. That was that kind of distracted me because I was about to be in big trouble. But there was so much else going on that didn't happen.
Yeah. And by trouble, you mean being punished by her,
Punished, yes, yes.
which was fucking horrible. Just
Yeah,
fucking horrible.
she was very punishing, and that was going to be a problem.
You know, I
But
wasn't
it,
sure. I wasn't sure how that letter would go down. And also, I sent it to non-executive board members
mhm,
because I thought if I can get it in at the bottom and it can work its way through before it gets shut down,
yeah,
um, it would go further. It didn't have as much impact as I hoped it would have.
yeah, it didn't. I don't know why, but it didn't. I think we were in such an emergency mode at that point that we couldn't just sit and like take in what you were saying. I think it's
Yeah.
because so much was happening, and it was like scramble to save everything. And
Yeah.
I think that we really couldn't just sit there and ponder it and look at it. Plus, that was
Yeah.
not encouraged. You know, it's like we weren't supposed to
It
read Frank
wasn't.
report.
And I was angry. I wrote the letter out of anger, and anybody who is angry, so the audience
Oh,
knows,
yes.
anybody who is angry gets
No.
discounted.
Yes, you're angry. Whatever you think is, you have to deal with the anger.
Yeah, it's not valid. Like, he has to work his
Uh,
anger and work his disintegrations first
yes.
before he's even worth listening to.
Yes.
And I think at that point, I'd taken the lid off. I was so fucking rageful because I realized what he was doing,
Mm.
and I was so angry, not at the people that were still in, but I was angry at the fact that he'd head fucked them so badly that they were choosing against their own self interest.
hmm
It
Well,
fucking enraged me.
that's my whole life.
Hmm.
Choosing against my own self-interest.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, because yeah.
Just just to go back for a second, you know that stupid intensive that was designed to like make me turn against my wife? Do you still
Yes.
have those notes? Because I've been trying to find the notes.
That one, I don't think that was one of the last ones, so it wasn't repeated. So
Damn.
I just have bits and pieces. I might have bits and
Damn.
pieces I can send you. I think I sent you
Yeah.
everything I have at one
You
point.
sent me I wasn't sure if it was everything. And just so you guys understand, my audience, like a couple of years ago, I reached out to Karen and said, listen, I'm trying to defrag my brain. Can you send me all the education, all the level twos, all the everything you have? Because I need to read through and see what the fuck he did
hmm
to my head. And I haven't gotten through all of it, by the way.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
like I've gone through level 2A, B, C, D. Um, and I can understand some of it, but it's hard it's actually hard, as you know, without actually going through the experience and just reading it. It's hard to actually see what was done. But there was all this weird like line bending and like switching of morality. You know, here's another thing I wanted to ask you. I um, I've become very good friends with this psychologist. You've probably seen him online, Richard Grannon. He's like a
Hmm.
buddy of mine, and he's been in Portugal the last week, and so we've been taking walks. And he said to me one day recently, like maybe 5 days ago, he said, "Can you just explain to me what the tech was?
Oh,
Explain it. Explain what an EM was." And I thought, and so it was the first time in a long time that I tried to explain. But I just love to hear, like, if you were to try and explain
what the tech was?
what it was, because it wasn't just complete mumbo jumbo. Like, how would you
No,
explain?
in fact, I believe he stole it. Morty Lefko had the gentleman has since he passed, I think after
Yeah,
ESP started.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Somebody pointed his stuff out to me, and what I saw of it was very, very similar. Of course, he put his stuff out there for anybody to have. It wasn't like Keith, where
Mm-hmm.
this is proprietary, secret knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was very similar in that when we react to something with a particular emotion, it's because we put meaning on whatever happened. You know, you cut in front of me in line. I think you're doing that because you think I'm worthless, and I think I'm worthless. I mean, it gets down to that.
Mm-hmm.
And what Morty Lefko does is show someone that there are other possibilities of what it could have meant. We would drill down to your core insecurities and
Mm-hmm.
attempt to point out to you that those insecurities were based on lies
Mm-hmm.
that you were told or you tell yourself.
Yeah,
Um, but it got people down to the very vulnerable part aspects of themselves, which is the dangerous part of it.
yeah.
Because when you get somebody there, you can put in any information you want. Yeah.
Exactly right. This is the thing I've tried to explain to people that are still practicing the tech.
Yeah, it was a very hard decision for me because I didn't have any income when everything went down, and I had to give up a substantial income to stop doing it. But I very quickly after things ended, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't.
Yeah. I want to add to what you're saying because the thing that I want people to understand, and I think one day I'll talk about it in more detail. Maybe we can do another podcast episode where we talk about it in more detail. But
Yeah.
like, you know, what Karen's talking about is like the reaction you're having. Is there something happening between the stimulus, the thing you experience,
Hmm.
and you know you have a reaction? So something happens in between, and you make a meaning of that. And so what you're trying to get to is as close to before you make the meaning. Like there's a process of somehow you make the meaning, but like as close as you can to
Hmm.
the stimulus to figure out what's going on a very deep level that's not conscious. It's not a
And
cognitive process.
no.
And in order to get there, you have to put a person back in a pre-language state, almost a childlike infantile state where their brains like mush and they can't think straight. And what you help them get back to the point that they realize that the thing doesn't make sense, but they're very confused. It's almost like they're in a trance.
Mm-hmm.
And when Karen talks about it's dangerous, because in that state, you're very open to suggestion. And if you're doing it like with good intent, I suppose you'd ask them like, well, what other options could there be? And you know, they might arrive at something. Or you can do what Raniere and some of the trainers who will remain fucking nameless would do, which is basically tell you what reality is. And in
Hmm.
that confused state, you hold on to that because it seems solid.
We called it putting in data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
putting in data. Yeah. And the thing is, I remember even hearing that. I was thinking, well, that seems innocent enough because there's data that they can't see.
Hmm.
But I did start to wonder, like, sometimes people like Nancy would put in data and I'm like, that's not fucking data. That's your fucking opinion.
Well, no, and oftentimes it was Keith's opinion. There was
Mm,
people, the worst one case I think was Barbara Boucher. There was people who there were meetings before people went in to EM her on what they had to get across to her in that EM.
yes. Yes.
One of the reasons I was rarely ever sent out to do that is because I refused. I always came back unsuccessful because I refused to do it.
Yes.
But you had to convince her of something in the EM, get her to see the truth, his truth,
Yes.
that she was bad and he was right. Um, that is planned in many cases, especially with the women around him, the women who were involved with him. It was pre-planned what data needed to get in.
Yes. I recognized that later because I realized that some of the women that were having normal jealousy reactions
Mhm.
were having their minds reframed to where they realized that they were being selfish and trying to own people and trying to own him, and
Yes.
he's got a mission and like blah blah blah, and they ended up feeling like they were the problem because they wanted a monogamous relationship with him.
Hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
I've been there. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The worst one
Yeah.
was the night Keith's son was born. Um, the woman didn't know she was pregnant. She also had cancer, so there was a lot of complications. But she was rushed to the hospital because the cancer, she was bleeding out. And when we found out all of a sudden, she just had a baby because she had to give birth to the baby because of the cancer. I immediately went over and I was in shock. Even Pam didn't know he was with this particular person.
Yeah.
And
And this particular person lived next door to you.
no,
Well, one
no,
over.
at that time, no, at that time she lived with us.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, but I went and got an EM and then flipped it. The baby was in the NICU for like a month and a half. I went and visited it every day. I became grandma. The only way I could deal with the pain of he had a child with someone else when he'd been promising me a child for years was to jump all in and become grandma to the child. Um, but that was
Wow.
because that night I went and got an EM, which showed me exactly what you're describing, being selfish, um, to want him to myself, or want to
Wow.
be special. I need to be special by having the baby first or something. There was, yeah,
Yes. And just so the audience understands, he promised most, if not all, of the women that they would have the special avatar
avatar
child. I
child.
don't think he said
Yes.
avatar child, but the special. But this did he never said avatar child?
I
Did he?
didn't.
He never said
He
that.
did. I think that was probably Pam that said that, but I didn't care if it was. I just wanted the first child, or a child.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and but there were some people that were very into the hooky spooky and thought the child was going to be
Yeah. Yeah. They were, and I want to go to one thing, but before that, I want to go back to like because
all over the place.
you EM'd me a lot, and I remember. Uh, I think this is a good thing. I'm going to say. I think it is. Um, there just from audience understands, it was like therapy by numbers, psychology by
Hmm.
numbers, and there was such a regimented way. And with Karen, it was interesting because I'd come with dreams, I'd come with this, I'd come with that, and she'd get me way down, way fast to like some really core important things. But Karen never said, "Well, that's not a stimulus." Karen was like, "I don't care what it is. If you think it's true, we'll work. We'll use that as the entry point." And what happened is, weirdly enough, I got to some good stuff. You know, I mean, I had a lot of good awarenesses, and so that was always interesting to me. Is that in terms of anybody who was doing EMs, I always preferred you
Oh,
because it was never
yeah.
punishing,
No,
and it was
oh, no,
always
no, no.
no, it was never punishing. It was always exploratory, and I always got shit out of it. I got good stuff out of it. Um, so listen, I want to go to something interesting. I think I told you this, and if I didn't, let me tell you now.
Okay.
I was walking down Flintlock Lane one day. We walked with him. We all walked with him so much, but I
Oh, yeah.
remember, and everybody was getting cancer. All the women
Oh,
were getting cancer. All the women closest to him were getting cancer. And I said to him, "What is going on? Like, what is it? Is it electromagnetic radiation? Is it in the water? How are the women closest to you that you spend most time with getting cancer? I do not understand." And he says, "I just don't know. It's a mystery."
he blamed um, basically people like you, people on the outside, were trying to hurt him, and it was getting us instead. Is one of the things he said at one point.
Somehow we were causing his cancer that
There
he
was
was
something
passing on to
put
you.
into my condo that was causing, because the curious thing was that I had bladder cancer and Pamela Kayfritz had kidney cancer. They're kind of in the same thing. So he's the one that first told me you should have the drains or your hair checked to see if there was something in the house. They might have, but he said they might be trying to kill him. So of course everything's about him. Um, that was one of the things I was most upsetting to me was he left me in the house alone when they all moved out that he thought was causing cancer. And he wanted me to stay there because I mentioned one point, I'd like to move. And he's like, yeah, stay here. Um,
I had some
but
theories. I mean, I know that there were hair tests and like there's
yeah, that was
theories
me.
that he was
That was my hair.
yeah, that was you, yeah. That he was poisoning you gals. And I still think that's a possibility.
hmm Yeah.
Um and I think it's a possibility as well because when can I talk about this? Yes, they're all dead. Um when Pam Crayford's was in the hospital, somebody said that when the nurse went out, he slipped some kind of a liquid into her mouth, and I thought, well, that's really fucked up. Why would he do that? Um, so that was one thing that got me thinking that maybe he was, and also the twisted idea that I have to keep on thinking and I talk about these things. And when I realize they're dead, I'm like, yes, I can talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Like in the case of Barbara Jeske, I think what I realized later, and this doesn't mean it's true, this just means what came to me, is the possibility that he had been poisoning her and standing by her side, pretending to be the emotional leader who was losing a person he loved deeply. The idea that somebody could play that role and be poisoning the person to death at the same time,
Yes.
I finally was like, oh, that's possible.
Oh, that was him. He's
Yeah.
acting like he's helping you when he's actually destroying you at the same time.
Yeah.
That's the same thing where he would say, "Yeah, I would say to him, why do you support all this hooky, spooky, angel-y stuff that these people, other women are into?" And he'd say to me, "Yeah, I know it's hard. I'm trying." And I'm sure he said the same thing to them about me not being spiritual enough for them.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
but he would play these games like that, but he would act like, yeah, he's with you, he agrees with you, he's trying. It's just the people are so
yeah.
hard. He would do
Yeah.
that all the time. Um,
Yeah. I don't know if I told you this, but like I tried and tried and tried to make the case for poisoning with the FBI.
mm,
And
can't prove it.
I couldn't prove it. They couldn't prove it. So it
The,
never
the,
went anywhere.
yeah, I mean, when I got the results back on my hair, because I had very long hair down my waist and I had cut it at one point. So the hair was older from the time period that mattered, and they did find some stuff in it. But Pam's and my cancers, because they were similar, same body parts system, that was suspicious to me. But I wrote it off because Barbara had brain cancer and another woman had cervical cancer. So I'm like, oh, those aren't similar. But it's too many because at one point
It's too
it was
many.
me, Barb, and Pam, and
Yeah.
Keith. The three,
Yeah.
we were the three musketeers,
Yeah.
very tight. And we were also the old guard, the people that he was sort of like pushing off, well, except for Pam, because she came with a young guard. um,
Yes.
we were the people that he was brushing off, and it was like, okay, let's just get rid of them before they can be harmful. But yeah.
Yeah. And my other theory, if I'm wrong about physical poisoning, you see, here's the weird thing. I remember like saying to the FBI, he's giving them cancer, and they said you can't give somebody cancer. I was like, yes, you can.
Yeah.
What about fucking radiation? It was so interesting. I'd have these arguments with them, and I was thinking to myself, do these guys like know how the world works? I mean, they must. But anyway, the other theory I had was the nocebo theory, the theory that like Okay, so if placebos do what they do, then there's a nocebo. Is he doing power of suggestion that's
Mm,
powerful enough that people are internally imploding and it's manifesting as physical cancer?
that's very possible because there was a lot of talk about, like when I first found out I had cancer, my coach at the time said, "Well, what did you do to cause this?"
Fuck.
Oh gosh. I mean, I had enough friends of mine at that point to laugh that one off or grunt at that one off. But there was a lot of belief that you gave yourself cancer because
Yeah.
you had breaches and other kind of stuff going on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I want you to talk about something else that when and by the way, the audience doesn't know this. When I went to visit you, I got in so much trouble. We're not going to discuss why because we don't need to, but I got in so much trouble from the lawyers and from
Oh
this and
yeah,
like
yeah, because
people
I'm on the other side.
people were
Yeah.
yelling at me and I was like, you don't understand, she could be a valuable asset. And they were like, don't you dare, blah blah blah. But I remember a little while after you told me about the mind mapping thing, brain mapping.
Brain mapping.
Yeah, so let me tell you what I remember. Like you told me that your therapist was explaining to you.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean? Because you
oh
told me about
yes,
the book.
yes, yes. Um, yes. What part of the therapy I had was I would write out, you'd appreciate this, like movie scripts, dialogues
Mm,
because I couldn't have any actual conversations with Keith. I would write out a dialogue between me that happened between me and Keith. And later we went to me and mom because all roads lead to mom.
yeah.
Um, and I would say what actually happened, and I would also go through how I could interact in that conversation and actually uphold myself, not back down,
Mm,
and just give myself away. And through that, he would teach me like my mother would make say the sadistic and cruel comment. She'd say, I think it was one of the things was she said, "Do I need to get a therapist for a psychiatrist for you?" And back in those days, that was like, "Are you sick?"
yeah.
Um, and that they say something that caused me pain, and he taught me to understand and that she knew what she was doing, or he knew what he was doing. They knew it hurt, and that was their intent, and they liked it. Those points, they could map my brain. They know what's going on. I mean, Keith, we know because he was very good at figuring people out. We know he knows what he's doing is hurting you on the inside. And he's doing it knowing that, and it was his intent. Understanding that some people have the intent to actually harm people and make them feel bad, or just in his case, actually twist them up so you're doing damage in here. Um, it was a hard thing to come to understand that people really want to do that. I had a phrase I used with a friend that kind of made that gentler. I said, we all act like assholes at sometimes in our life. Some people just are assholes, and
Hmm.
it was a nicer way of saying, but they really want this. And for those of us who are good people, you can't imagine doing that, doing it intently with like full cognitive understanding of what you're causing and want that. That was the hardest thing that I had to get across. And it's still sometimes I go, did they really? Like my first questions when I started reading all the books that you guys suggested was, did Keith know what he was doing? Did he know yes, that was a hard thing to come to. But that's where I got lucky because I didn't get a therapist that actually would like make all my parts happy with each other, which did happen, but it helped me get the realization and the reality of what's going on. Because once I realized that he is doing that, it's not about me anymore. It's not about me being deficient. I was, emotionally slapped. Um,
Yeah.
and there's a wound. It's not that I am a wounded person. That helps you get
Yes.
across that. When the thing with NXIVM was, you never got to that point. You dealt with your deficiency of why you felt bad, and you never went to the point of holding the person who did the damage accountable. That never happened. And most of the time it was him.
Yes.
So that was my journey, is being able to understand that there's really some not good people out there that enjoy doing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and the other thing I was thinking as well, and that is that by the way is one of the biggest hurdles I see for people. Anybody coming out of abusive relationships that I talk to or coming out of cults, they just are struggling, which is why I've been working on this film, The Narcissist Playbook, because basically to debunk that idea completely. And the other thing I was thinking is that I learned from you and from the book you told me about is this whole thing of, when you're mapping people, you're mapping their brain, you're mapping how they
They
work.
were,
And the
right?
problem is when you map a psychopath, it's not good for you.
No, no, no. Yeah. Well, it makes the world a scary place too. I don't want to know that there's people that, I don't know what doctor you've interviewed with Dr. Ramani. I
Mm,
think she says like 1 in 20 or something people out there think like this.
yeah.
To walk around in that world is not, I mean, obviously for most of my life it was preferable to walk around in the world I did walk in, where I'm the problem, than a
Yeah.
world where so many people are scary.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yes. And I think the saving grace for me in some ways has been, I think I've been interviewing a lot of self-confessed narcissists and
mhm.
sociopaths and psychopaths and stuff. It's been amazing actually,
Yeah.
because I don't know why. I don't feel, well, actually one of them is pretty fucking scary, but I feel relieved because Raniere never admitted anything.
No.
So I got to talk to these people who admitted it, and there was a weird proxy experience of like, oh, that's what was going on. That's what we were dealing with.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I still struggle with it because I spent so many years thinking he was, God's gift to the world, that it's hard to hold on to the understanding of what he really is. Um,
I get
yeah.
that. And by the way, I didn't know about your mom, and it's funny because as you say, you weren't allowed to really share anything, and that sucks. I'm really sorry that I
Oh,
see how that could have really set you up for the asshole.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
We called it
yeah,
shy back then, but it was beaten down. Yeah.
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 And I will tell you, I always wondered why you were so internal. Like I was thinking to myself, she's so internal, like she's so quiet. And I
It's
thought, well,
all,
maybe she's like brainiac tight, brainiac
there's a
quiet.
lot
I
going
wasn't
on in
sure.
there, but the problem is what was going on there. That's also when you describe how I did explorations of meanings with people. I saw other people as fragile as I felt. So when I'm working with you, I feel like I'm holding your soul in my hands, which is why
Mm,
I would like not push, not try to direct, would just follow along with this poor, beautiful little soul.
yes,
Um, so it was driven from
yes.
my own fears in a way, but I saw other people as fragile as I felt.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, because you never used force. I mean, I know that we all sometimes were forceful because we were ordered to do something or ordered to
Yes.
say something, and that was fucking forceful and
Oh,
horrible.
it was horrible.
Horrible. I hated it. I mean, I know you were sent to do that. I was sent to do that shit. And it just broke us inside because you're like, why did I do that? I mean, oh, honor. That's why. Principle, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But
Yeah,
the,
I've apologized to a few of those people
yeah,
because I just, yeah,
yeah,
it's just, you could have gotten out sooner if I hadn't convinced you that everything was okay
yeah,
when it wasn't.
yeah. No, exactly. And I think that's, by the way, I think that's why I just decided to lay my fucking chest bare on television,
Mm.
was because I was like, I felt so fucking bad about how I'd enabled this motherfucker, that I was like, I got to just do everything I possibly can to have people realize what it is, how it works. And really, like, the idea was that if I can figure out how to express what happened, and then people can go, oh, that's how it works, you
Hmm.
know?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love the
It was my
people.
obsession.
When you guys were first, especially when the vow first came out, I was watching Twitter, and
Mm.
there were the people, so many people said, how could they be so stupid? How could they?
Yep.
There was one gentleman that he wrote that, and he says, and so next year when I'm in a cult, please, show me this tweet. So it was like he understood that
Yeah.
people don't really get it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. That was brutal, by the way. Twitter was brutal. I mean,
Oh,
I literally screenshotted every horrible thing that they said about me. I've collected it. It's probably going to be in a book one day. The Wall of Shame, but like it just fucking destroyed me. And actually, it wasn't just The Vow. It was also the other TV shows that just were just brutal,
yeah.
you know. But I don't regret us doing that. And I'm super happy that, we got you on camera as well. Because
They
like that's
got
a
all, yeah.
whole story.
They got me on camera. They didn't use most of what they did
I
with
know.
me,
I
which I
know.
was grateful for because I didn't know at that point if I was strong enough yet to deal with the crap from the outside.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have a lot. They
Yeah.
followed me around a little bit. But it was
Yes.
good for me to be
Yes.
able to speak, even though it wasn't put out there, to be able to, because there was so much emphasis on, what he did at the end and ignoring that he'd been doing this for many, many, many years to a lot of people. Um, that it felt good to be able to at least say, hey, that was just him going too far and getting caught.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. And it really was amazing. It's been so amazing because I haven't had this experience with a lot of people of being able to like reconnect and talk about all the shit and laugh about, hey, we were enemies for a moment there, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I think it's
Oh,
very healing, right? It's super
yeah.
healing.
Yeah. Yes. Like I said, when you were a big factor in my head. We didn't talk, but in my head, a big factor in helping me get over the edge there. Um, and so when I connected with you and spoke with you, it just like validated that understanding so strongly. Um, because any doubts I had, doubt is what kept me there for so long. I kept saying, what if I'm wrong? What if he is God's gift to the world? How will I
Yeah.
feel about my fear of regret?
Yeah.
um got it. But yeah, reconnecting was just beautiful. Like I said,
It was
that was
amazing.
probably the only time I've cried is when you came and visited, since this whole thing happened. So
I hear you.
it was just, yeah.
It was awesome. It was awesome. Thank you so much for chatting with me in front of my audience. I have a feeling there's going to be a ton of questions. But yeah, thanks for being so open
Oh, thank
for them
you.
to hear.
I say thank you for my new life because you tore everything down and I came out of the ashes. So thank
You
you.
know what? Tearing down was the only good thing we could do at that point, right?
That beautiful thing. So thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, Karen. And to my audience, as always, please stay curious.